We are staying in Llandudno for 4 nights, before moving to a new location. As this is our first full day, we've decided to explore and experience the Great Orme, which is located right beside the town. The Great Orme, or Y Gogarth, is without doubt the most distinctive feature of the Llandudno landscape. It once was the only distinctive feature of the area, before the Victorian seaside town of Llandudno was built starting in 1848. From a distance, the Great Orme appears as an offshore island rising abruptly from the Irish Sea. It is only as you get closer that it becomes noticeable as a headland which is connected to the mainland. The Orme consists of a limestone mass, which is 2 miles in length and a mile wide, rising 679 feet above the sea, from which it rears so steeply and spectacularly on 3 sides. This fanciful resemblance to the head of a half-submerged sea monster is believed to account for its name's origin. The Orme comes from the Old Norse word, ormr, which means a giant worm or serpent, which is the antecedent of the Old English, worm. The 4th southeastern side is where the Orme is connected to the mainland by a very low flat strip of coastline known as the Serpent's Neck, that over millennia has been submerged and exposed alternately by the sea. In the pre-Roman era, copper and lead ore were mined on the Orme. Extraction was continued by the Romans, but apparently was later abandoned. It was only revived during the end of the 17th century. Mining continued for about 150 years, with land leased from the Orme owners, the Bishop of Bangor and the Mostyn family, whose seat was at Glovaith near the Little Orme, on the opposite side of the bay. The last copper mine to close in 1855 was Tygwyn, close to what is now the Marine Drive entrance to the pier. The end of mining in the town set in motion a chain of events leading almost directly to the construction of the Great Orme Tramway. From around the 6th century, a building has stood, in a hollow a little north of the comparatively level summit, on the site of the present St. Tidno's Church. The church gave its name to the parish. Llandudno means, the parish, or holy place of Tidno, and it originally served the handful of miners' cottages huddled together on the landward side of the Orme. The structure of the present church dates back to the early 15th century, although it was heavily rebuilt during 1859. Ironically, it lost its parish church status just 3 years later to St. George's in Church Walks. It still serves as a burial place of choice for many residents. As late as the mid-19th century the miners' cottages, and 2 small inns, were the only habitations on the landward side the peninsula, which was part of the Mostyn estate. All that was about to change, however, in a remarkable way. At the very same time as copper mining was dying in Llandudno, North Wales was becoming tourist conscious, and the Mostyn family realized that the rise of the fashionable watering place need by no means be confined solely to the south coast of England. With this in mind, they began a grand scheme, to not only build from scratch a complete resort, but to then elevate it to a position in the north equal to that occupied by Brighton in the south. In 1843, Edward, the first Baron Mostyn, obtained an Enclosure Act, permitting him to develop the low-lying peninsula, and in 1849, he offered for sale 176 plots of building land. The scheme had taken its first steps to becoming an unqualified success. This development could only take place because Llandudno lost out to Holyhead in the 1840s in the competition to find a suitable railhead for the mail boat service to Ireland, thus preventing the hamlet from becoming the site of a major port. It appears that the idea for the resort scheme came from Lord Mostyn's estate agent, who was also secretary to the Tygwyn Mining Company. Therefore in an excellent position to observe the declining fortunes of mining in the area. It was from these humble beginnings that the town sprung up to how it stands today, facing out to the east across the great curve of Orme's Bay, bounded by the Great Orme on the left, with its smaller namesake, Little Orme to the right. With its broad promenade, and majestic sweep of hotels and boarding houses along the bay, it followed rigidly the pattern of its day. The other reason for Llandudno's success was behind the town. There's another beach, longer and wider than the east-facing one, plus it was a much more desolate stretch of sand bordering the Conwy estuary. This added attraction, together with the majestic Great Orme, and these sealed Llandudno's success. With the addition of Llandudno being added to the national railway system in 1858, and the opening of the present-day pier in 1877, enabling visitors to take the air, and to make use of the steamer services to Liverpool, and neighbouring resorts, everything was booming for the town, and in 1892, the new 5-platform railway station opened, which was designed to cope with the summer increase in visitor numbers, sealing the town as the Queen of Welsh watering places by 1877. The Great Orme Tramway is Britain's only cable-driven funicular tram that travels right along public roads. Today we are taking the full journey, climbing 1,500 meters past ancient limestone cliffs, stopping to switch cars at the historic halfway station, and rising up to the wild panoramic summit where views stretch all the way to Eryri, otherwise known as Snowdonia. So let's take a ride and enjoy this historical experience. The history of the tramway all starts in September 1894, when Henry Enfield Taylor, a mining engineer, submitted a scheme to the Works Committee of the Llandudno District Council for a tramway from the pier head to a point in the northeast below the summit. The proposed route would have required the tramcars to reverse direction at a point about 1/4 of the total distance. A second proposal submitted by Taylor in 1895 avoided the need to reverse, but the route would end up in the Bishop's Quarry, well below the summit. In November 1895, Misters Kincaid, Weller, and Manville of London submitted a scheme for an electric tramway using the Marine Drive route around the Great Orme, from Pierhead to the West Shore, with the circuit completed via the southern carriageway of Glovithe Avenue. The scheme envisaged branches to both Deganwy and Llandudno railway stations. Nothing came of these proposals. Then in 1896, an organising committee led by Richard Conway was formed with many other of Llandudno's business community to promote a scheme for a tramway to the summit of the Great Orme. The Great Orme Tramways Company on the 23rd of May 1898 was issued by an Act of Parliament, 2 years to purchase the land, and a further 3 years for construction, with a share capital of £25,000, and borrowing powers of £6,250. The Act empowered building of the tramway from the yard at the Victoria Hotel in Old Road, to a midway point, and there to a point 110 yards from the Telegraph Beer House on the Great Orme's head. Construction began in April 1901, in the Old Road, and it proceeded quickly. The 4 double-bogie passenger tramcars are each 37 feet long, and seat 48 people, on wooden seats. They were built in 1902 to 1903, by Hurst Nelson and Company of Motherwell. They are numbered 4, 5, 6, and 7, and each were fitted with mechanical wheel and track brakes. Numbers 4 and 5 are fitted with water tanks for the driver to use as a lubricant on the steep and curved lower section. They are also fitted with a powerful spring-loaded and cam-operated emergency brake that can automatically be engaged with the rails within the cable conduit, and operated whenever a lack of tension occurs on the haulage cable. The passenger cars all carry the name, Great Orme Tramway, in full, on both sides. 3 earlier vehicles from the same builder, numbered 1, 2, and 3, were smart 4-wheeled end balcony-covered vans, called jockey cars, that were used during the construction and after, possibly for coke and freight transport. These were eventually scrapped sometime before 1930. All these vehicles were supplied under a type of hire purchase agreement with R. White & Sons. That company supplied the mechanical equipment, engines and boilers, under their original contract. The steel haulage cables have a hemp core, and are made using Langley pattern plough steel. They were made by St. Helens Cable Company, and the first cables were hauled up the hill to the engine house by a team of 12 horses. The St. Helens Cable Company and its successor, Bryden Ropes, have supplied replacement cables for each section every 2 or 3 years throughout most of the tramway's life. Langley pattern plough steel haulage ropes were common use in mines and similar locations worldwide during the 20th century. From the start, the construction and operation of the Great Orme Tramway has differed greatly from the famous San Francisco cable car system. The design of the haulage system for the Great Orme Tramway relied heavily on existing cable haulage systems that were used for colliery inclines, but with additional safeguards. The lower tramway from Victoria Station to the halfway station is a street funicular with the traction cables in conduit below the public highway. The upper tramway from the halfway station to the summit station is closer in design to a conventional funicular, with exposed cables running between the rails. On both sections the cars are stopped and started by stopping and starting the cable, which are in turn both driven by a winding engine at the halfway station. The Great Orme Tram driver needs instant communication with the winding engineer, and this was provided from the start by a telegraph and telephone link through a trolley pole and an overhead copper wire. In the now unique San Francisco system, which has been used in numerous places throughout the world, the cables run continuously in the conduits, and the cars start and stop by the use of a gripper mechanism that attaches and detaches the cable, which is under direct control of the driver. The Great Orme cars are permanently attached to the cable, and the system has sometimes been called a double reverse funicular tramway, whereas the famous San Francisco system works on a different principle and is not a funicular tramway. July 30, 1902, and Colonel von Donop inspected the lower tramway and expressed himself very satisfied with the automatic emergency brake, very necessary on a 1 in 4 line, and he gave his full approval for the company to operate a public passenger service. Ivor Wynne-Jones, in his excellent history, Llandudno, Queen of the Welsh Resorts, Landmarks Collectors Library 2002, recorded that Arthur Reginald Ellison, who was the resident engineer during construction of the line, had, by his own admission, made in retirement in 1963 aged 87, conspired with the winding engine man to deceive the inspector concerning the effectiveness of the emergency brake on that occasion. On the 31st of July 1902, as the holiday season was already in full swing, the public service on the lower section started without ceremony, except for the town band playing "God Save the King," as the very first tram full of passengers left Victoria Station to ride up the Great Orme as far as the halfway station. The year ended with over 75,000 passengers travelling on the tram, and taking £900 in ticket sales. But it was on the 8th of October 1902, that the emergency brake, which had received Colonel von Donop's commendation, caused problems in the day-to-day operations, on numerous occasions. But notably on October the 8th, which was Harvest Thanksgiving Day, a popular holiday. A slight mishandling of the control gear caused a jerk and a momentary slackening of the lower haulage cable, resulting in the immediate application of the brake. Excellent proof that the brake worked, but releasing and resetting it took 4 hours, during which time the line was closed and out of action, and as a consequence caused much disappointment and significant loss of revenue. Similar minor mishaps and long delays occurred several times during 1903 to 1905, and eventually the emergency brake was disconnected, whilst a solution was sought. The tramway operated throughout the autumn and winter until Saturday the 3rd of January 1903, when it was closed for maintenance. On May the 8th, 1903, Colonel von Donop came and examined the upper section, but hopes of opening for the Whitsuntide were dashed, when he identified significant work that needed to be done before opening to passenger traffic. Passenger services started, again without ceremony, on the upper section following the completion of the remedial work, and 1903 ended with over 77,000 passengers having travelled on the Great Orme Tramway, and the profit earned was again used to complete outstanding works. These included the demolition of the Victoria Hotel, and the realignment of the tramway into the present fronting on Church Walks. Sheds for overnight and winter storage of the trams were constructed at the halfway and summit stations. The Act of Incorporation empowered the company to build a hotel on the summit, but in 1903, lacking funds, they persuaded Mr. Griffith B. Morgan, the catering manager of the Great Northern Railway of Ireland, to undertake the project. He brought the former telegraph in for £1,500 and had a new hotel and 18-hole golf course built on 175 acres of leased adjoining lands. Morgan also became a director of the Great Orme Tramways Company. This new enterprise was quickly bankrupt, and the hotel was later completed to a much less ambitious plan. The golf course wasn't popular due to frequent high winds on the Great Orme, and during 1939 the land was used for sheep farming. Also during 1939 the RAF requisitioned the hotel for use as a radar station. On the 19th of June 1906, Colonel von Donop inspected the alignment of the tramway track at the Blackgate area, where the tramway passes from Old Road onto Tide-Wyn Road, on a 1:4 gradient. The inspector gave his approval. There has been two minor incidents over the years, the first in 1909, and the second in 1911, both without injury or serious damage. Strong winds are well known on the Great Orme, and in October 1917 a tramcar standing outside the summit station was blown off the tracks, and a similar accident occurred in September 1922. The tramway continued to operate its seasonal service throughout the First World War, until it was forced to stop in 1918 owing to a lack of replacement haulage cables. The first 29 years of service has been described as accident-free, and during that time over 3,700,000 passengers rode the tramway in complete safety. The Great Orme Tramway Company had its first major accident on August 23, 1932, when Car 4 was descending the steep 1:3.7 stretch at Tabor Hill, on the upper end of Old Road, when the drawbar suddenly broke, and the car became detached from the cable, and left the rails on reverse curves, crashing into a wall, resulting in the deaths of the driver and a 12-year-old girl. On the 29th of August, 6 days after the accident, an inquiry was held, and the line was ordered to remain closed. The outcome was the use of inferior metals used in the drawbar construction manufactured by a separate company. It wasn't until 1934 that the tramway was able to reopen, and it had a very successful season. The company changed its name on March 30, 1935 from the Great Orme Tramways, and became known as the Great Orme Railway. During 1949 the 29-bedroom hotel and the golf course were rehabilitated following the RAF withdrawal, and they were both offered for sale as the Great Orme International Sporting and Holiday Centre. Unfortunately it failed to find a buyer. Later the golf course was sold to a local farmer, Howell Jones, who returned it to sheep farming. The hotel finally sold to Randolph Turpin for £10,000, with the hope of developing the sporting holidays idea. This unfortunately failed and the hotel was later sold to Llandudno Council. By 1956 the steam winding gear was showing its age, and the main boiler was nearing the end of its working life. Conversion to electric haulage promised significant savings in the running costs, and a contract was signed during 1956. The steam plant was shut down for the last time in October 1957, and electric haulage started at Easter 1958. In 1969 the tramway faced serious competition from the newly constructed and privately owned Great Orme Cable Lift, offering a 9-minute ride in 42 four-seater cabins, on a 10,750 feet continuous steel cable supported by 9 pylons in a straight line from Camera Hill, which is close to Happy Valley, to the summit of Great Orme. In 1973, the Great Orme Railway became a member of the Great Little Trains of Wales. On October 30, 1991, a press release announced that a tram car was to be taken off the Great Orme at 10 a.m. that day. This was the very first time in history that a bogie car, number 7 to be precise, had been removed. The operation involved a large mobile crane and a low loader to take the tram car for repairs. It was finally returned in April 1992. On Friday 31st of July 1992, the 90th anniversary of the opening of the tramway was celebrated, with the cooperation of the Museum of Fair Collection, which is a museum of transport in Manchester. Plus it was at this time that Tramway's first guidebook was written by Rosemary Sutton, and then published. April 30, 2000, was the day when an accident left 17 people injured after 2 trams collided, owing to a failure of some facing points positioned along the track. Then in September 2001, the new halfway station buildings were officially opened. The Great Orme Tramway survives as a masterpiece of both Victorian and Edwardian ingenuity. It stands as a testament to the engineers who dared to track up this formidable headland. This is Britain's only cable-hauled street tramway, and it's still conquering the Great Orme day after day, taking about 200,000 visitors every year to the summit, about 1.5 miles from Llandudno. At 679 feet above sea level, the summit offers breathtaking views over North Wales, Eryri National Park and the Irish Sea. Near to the summit you can delve 60 feet down into the amazing underground Bronze Age copper mines that are about 4,000 years old. The Great Orme is an unforgettable experience for all the family, and today, the tramway still operates just as it did when it first opened back in 1902.